Good morning, everybody. Minutes before meetings. Oof, the worst. The worst. I'm sorry to hear that. No good. No good 10 minutes before meetings. Like every day. How's everyone doing this morning? Everyone well? Everyone doing anything interesting? Hey, Haley. Morning. Think I'm gonna put an extra shot in my coffee this morning, like you do. Extra shot. I got a new kind of, I got this Diabolito extra shot thing. Like I haven't had this flavor before, so I'm interested to see what's going on. You guys want to hear some vindication in my soul? Morning. I'm tired. I was up every hour. I tried to sleep. I just couldn't. It's terrible. Looks like the heart of the ocean. Yeah, I went down and got it for you. Aw, you shouldn't have. Oops, I did it again to your heart, got lost. I love that this has become my new morning routine. Hey, it's a morning routine for a lot of us, Brian, not just you. What are you drinking this morning? Brian, are you a coffee person? Morning creations of a moonchild. Ooh, it's a fun username. Did it again to your heart. Hey, Tiffany. Got lost in this game, oh baby. Oops, you. Water is good. Wait, Sasha, I need to send you the latest Anne Juliet TikTok video. No, don't send me. This is Diabolito. Don't send me any Anne Juliet stuff because I want to see Anne Juliet and I don't like spoilers. I don't watch anything before it's in honor of the BSB anniversary. Okay, as long as it's not about the show. If it's anniversary, I'll take it. Let's put an extra shot in here. I have a question before. Who does everyone think it played the best Eponine? Ooh. Who was the best Eponine? Lea Salonga, hands down. 3 Lungo Nespressos out of the same pod with the splash of peppermint. I feel like I did know that. I remember you saying out of the same pod, and I was like, Brian, what? What? I'm good, new phone. How are you? Lea Salonga is Eponine. I just caught up on this book. It's great. Hate to miss the last chapter of the Land of Stories. I know. I'm trying to upload it. It's been trying to upload. You like my hair? Oh my gosh, it's a mess. My hair's a disaster right now. I've been trying to upload the last bit of Land of Stories for literally like a week. I think I have to cut it into 2 videos. My friend and I are having an argument. Who do you think is the best Eponine? Lea Salonga is the best everything. I agree. Lea Salonga is a hero. You won't get me to back down on this one. Who do you think is the best Eponine? Yeah, stupid YT for sure. Can you play with slime? No, I'm making coffee. You okay, bro? You're a little loud this morning. Do you like Nespresso? I love my Nespresso. I don't just like my Nespresso creations. I love it. I live for my Nespresso. Oh, I didn't plan that properly at all, did I? I live for it. I don't know how I lived before I had my Nespresso. I really don't. I don't know how I lived without it. I don't know how I will ever live without it again, if I ever have to. I don't know. Not his morning, obviously, I know. Why am I so hungry, you guys? Why am I so hungry? See, I'm the espresso person versus... the Nespresso is... I do the coffee and the espresso pods, Brian. I do both. This has both in it. I have to clean out my fridge this weekend. It's rank. Oof. Have you tried the Cinnabon creamer? My sister has, and she likes it. I don't think the Cinnabon one comes in sugar-free, does it? I can only have the sugar-free ones. It's so good, is it? Cheers to deliciousness. I just realized that I left my water upstairs, which means I'm going to have to use a different water cup. Or we could just go get it. Should we just go get it instead? Sasha, have you seen Lance Longa? Great performances on PBS. No, I have not, because I'm not really a PBS person. They lost me with the Muppets as a child, but I'm sure it's lovely. Let's just go upstairs really quickly and get... Will it make you happy to use the cup that's in? Yeah, I'm just going to go get my cup. I'm sure it's really good. But I also don't... Shelly, you have to remember, I just don't watch that kind of stuff. Like, everyone's always like, oh, this thing was recorded of this show. Did you watch the recording? And I'm like, no. Because I just don't. I never get around to it. You know? Hamilton is on Disney Plus, and I've never even seen it all the way through. But did you see Sam Barks perform live? I saw clips of it, that's for sure. I saw clips of her performing live. Woo-wee. Woo-wee. I did. You know, I'm not a fan. Not a fan. She was not my choice for anything theatrical. It's hold a special place in my heart because it was my first and only time seeing Les Mis. Ah, well, that makes sense. There are some things that are my first and only time seeing something where I can recognize that it wasn't the best and I still love it anyway just because of what it is, you know? Wait, before we start reading, do you all want to hear the most life-affirming theater moment? I'm good, Mary. How are you? The most life-affirming theater kid moment that has ever happened to a person. Like, yesterday with Zoe, I had something happen that I did not believe was going to happen, and it set my heart ablaze. It set my heart ablaze. So, I don't know if Brian knows how old Zoe is. Zoe's my niece, and she's 2. Everyone else knows Zoe. So yesterday, somebody was commenting on one of my carousel videos, and I don't usually go on TikTok or have my phone open in that way around Zoe. Like, Zoe and I will make videos together, like just the two of us or whatever. We don't post them or anything like that, but like, I rarely go on social media when Zoe's around. But somebody commented on one of my carousel videos, and so I wanted to respond to that person. It was positive, it was fine, whatever. And so the video started playing, and Zoe hears Shirley singing If I Loved You, right? Which was like one of my songs of my childhood, right? And she goes like this. She goes, wow, so beautiful. And I was like, yeah, it is beautiful, honey. Good ear. You know, she sings really well. And then she goes, see her dancing? And I was like, oh, honey, you know what? She doesn't dance in this one. She's not a dancing character in this one. And so I thought about it for a second because, you know, Zoe's only true love is dance. And she always wants to watch all the characters dancing, right? And so I thought to myself, I said, you know what? I'm just going to try something. I don't know how this is going to work, but I'm just going to try it. So I pulled up a clip on YouTube. This is true. This really happened. A clip on YouTube. There is a 7-minute YouTube video of the barn dance from Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. And anyone who doesn't know Seven Brides for Seven Brothers, first of all, not only is it old-fashioned, but second of all, the barn dance, there's no speaking, no singing, no anything, right? It's just this amazing dance sequence that goes on for 7 minutes in real time, right? I'm sitting with a 2-year-old. This 2-year-old watched this 7-minute dance scene that is my favorite, by the way, and has been my favorite since I was her age, 3 times in a row, over and over and over again. No cartoons, no singing, no anything. Just watched these people who are like the top skilled people in their industry at the time dance.
and she reacted properly to every moment as like an audience member would. Like there was a moment when, hey Zoya, there's all these different moments in that scene, right? But like when the guys who are all in gray versus the Pontepe brothers come and try to take the girl, she goes, oh no. And I was like, I know, right? Like, gosh, terrible that they're dancing with these guys in gray. And then when the guys would like slide in like off of her, she was like, wow, good jumping. I was like, I know, right? They're so good at it. And I was like, wow, Zoe. And Seven Brides for Seven Brothers is like my favorite everything. So the fact that, and so Catherine comes back from her doctor's appointment. And by the time Catherine got back, we had turned off the video and we were just listening to See You Later, Amanda, Seven Brides for Seven Brothers on Spotify. And Zoe was trying to mimic the dances that were happening. And Catherine walked in and she was like, so you're clearly an American. You know what? I'm not an American in Paris fan. I'm not. I'm actually not a dance fan in general. The only dance that I really love is Seven Brides for Seven Brothers. I love it. She's amazing, clearly. She does have artistic role models. She's such a sweet baby. She's such a sweet baby. Yeah. So she's trying to learn the dance. She even holds her skirt out like this now. I don't know if any of you have ever seen it, but they hold their skirts like out in front of them like this at the beginning of that dance. And now she does that. So in case you were wondering, it's genetic. It's genetic, right? Like 2-year-olds don't just like that. I was going to suggest Wally until it said it was dance numbers. Well, she will. No, she'll watch that also. It doesn't have to just be dance numbers. Like Brian, currently her favorite thing is Brandy's Cinderella, that particular version of Cinderella, Rodgers and Hammerstein Cinderella, she wants the one with Brandy specifically, is her favorite right now. Wait till 3, that's the best age. They have toddler talk, but you can understand and they mimic. You know what? She's going to be 3 in a couple of months, and she's always been a mimic. Not for Brandy. Why not for Brandy? And she's in love, Brian, if you don't know this, Zoe is in love with Paolo Montalban. Like, so, you know, we need a remake with Kiki and, oh, you know what? That's not a bad idea. Yeah. I didn't see her in the stage Cinderella. She has to see her prince. She has to see her prince. She is all about Paolo. He is her one true love currently. Yeah. Yeah. So that's what happened. Should I pull the winner of the giveaway now, or should I read first and then pull the winner of the giveaway? I don't know. She also, when she wants to listen to Whitney Houston now, instead of saying like, can I listen to Whitney or whatever like that, she says, play the fairy, because to her, Whitney Houston is just, would know that it was happening legitly and in real time. Hold on. Where's the giveaway? Here it is. Okay, how am I going to do this? I have to get off soon because of work. Yeah, so what I'm going to do, okay, let's pick a number, and I'm going to scroll till that Brandy Cinderella is my favorite. I could watch it all day. Zoe, too, is her favorite. So I'm going to pick a number. How many of you are on here right now? There's 18 of you on here right now, so the number is going to be 18. So what I'm going to do is I'm just going to count to 18 and scroll, and then we'll stop. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18. Oh, that went really far. All right, well, let's see. Tired and tested. That's great. That's great. Okay, Tired and Tested is the winner. Tired and Tested 93. There, let's just check and make sure they followed all the rules. They did. Core memory, when I had a flip phone, when the flip phone first came out and my friends had one while I was still playing Snake on my Nokia beep beep phone. Is it bad that I still have the phone and I play it from time to time? You know what? This person sounds like they are in the right age group. I wanted a millennial to win this so that it was you know, not just some kids stealing our thunder. And this person sounds like they know what's up. If they still have their Nokia phone to play Snake on, I'm going to give them an A+. Nokia is amazing. No shade to Nokia. No, none whatsoever. So that is the winner of the day. They will have 24 hours to contact me after I post it, obviously. And then if they don't respond in 24 hours, then I'll pull a different winner. Okay. Let's get to reading. Anyone who doesn't know, we're on Wasteland, probably born in 1983. Same as my brother. My brother was also born in 93. So we are gonna do some reading now. It's Piper's chapter. Let's go. Let's read. Chapter 13, Piper, December 25th, 2345, Flagstaff, Arizona. Ooh, there's a lot of people missing this morning who have been waiting on Piper. I hope they're okay. They're going to have to watch this later because we've been waiting for Piper to reappear. I'm not sure why Beck is making me do this, Piper started before immediately pausing the recording. It had been too long, in her opinion, to try and look back to the past and attempt to make sense of it. But since it was most likely because of Beck that Piper was even still alive to talk just then, she supposed she should oblige her. Just this once. Hitting the record button on her tab, she resumed, "My name is Piper, and I am, or at least I was, a Viking of Svalbard. I had seen 19 winters when I left my home with Jericho Johnson to aid him in the quest to save the world. They tell me that I am 22 now, although at times I feel ancient, and that I'm barely hanging on to my sanity in this place that seems the old gods have forgotten." She'd been stranded here in this frozen wasteland of the future for almost 3 years, swept away from everything in her normal life and dropped into what seemed to be the remains of a war-torn world covered in snow and ice. This day, the one that Jericho had told her about a lifetime ago on a fishing trip, meant nothing to Piper or her kinsmen. She remembered him telling her that people from this time exchanged gifts and shared food, drink, and song to celebrate what he called Christmas. She hadn't listened too intently because on that day, her thoughts kept being thrown into the wind, whatever she considered his face, and watched his wonderful mouth move as he spoke. Piper sighed, but didn't stop the recording. "I took him for granted then, and now he's gone." She would have died 1,000 deaths in the fire of Helheim to see him again, to hold his hand, to touch his face, or kiss his lips. At the moments she was with him now seemed to be distant to her, and the notion of losing Jericho in her thoughts had been weighing on her a lot recently. Sometimes she tried to recall certain features about him only to discover, to her horror, that she couldn't. Somehow, the idea at times felt worse than the day that she actually lost him. It was this place, it had to be, where she came from, where brave warriors like Jericho were honored after dying in battle and talked about for years and years to come. Here, no one talked about death or even contemplated it because death was everywhere. There was no laughter here. There was no joy, no mead halls bustling with life and tales of brave men and fallen heroes. But here there was nothing but frozen landscape and frozen hearts, barely beating inside what was left of humanity. None of the many wars going on even seemed to make sense to Piper. Most wars were fought with the idea of obtaining peace and joy afterwards, something worth fighting for. War here was different than demon altogether. It was a different demon altogether. It seemed that the people of this time lived just to fight and fought just to live. It seemed very harsh and unforgiving cycle to her, and it didn't take a month of being there before she became too much of a slave to this snow-covered place, fighting to survive without any ray of hope in sight. "I'll be back in a jiff, Pipe," Jericho had told her years ago, kissing her forehead and squeezing her shoulders. And then he turned to Beck and said, "Take care of her." "It would be my pleasure, considering she seemed to be the only person with any sense out here," Beck told him. They had taken out most of Klaus's men with the chopper beforehand, and Beck and Piper were supposed to guard the entrance while Jericho and Chloe went to the tall building that Klaus had escaped into. "I want to go with you," Piper had insisted. "And I want you to stay," he said, pulling her into a hug before releasing her and turning on his heels. The long coat that he was wearing whirled around him when he did so. "Come on, Chloe, the world ain't saving itself." It wasn't until after she watched the enormous building explode and collapse, almost burying Beck, her squad, and Piper in the rubble, that she realized his last hug had felt different than all the others. "No!" she screamed, crumbling to her knees, her hands reaching for the black smoke billowing into the white sky. "We have to move," Beck's voice crackled in her ear, but she didn't hear her as she made a mad dash towards the building. "Jericho!" Beck, who, as she told Piper on several occasions, wasn't your average girl, ran and tried to grab her. "Piper, he's gone. We have to get out of here." Piper could barely hear her over the sound of metal on metal when the iron foundation shattered in front of them. And then she felt Beck grab her around the waist and sling her over her shoulder as she leapt and dashed through the icy streets to get them into a clear of the aftershock. Next thing she knew, they were inside an abandoned building on the second floor. Piper could still make out the dust kicking up into the air around the shattered window. "Report," Beck said, touching her earpiece as she dropped Piper onto the floor in a heap. "Robin, Gage," she tried. After no one answered her, she sighed, glancing out the window towards the large fire engulfing the remains of the building that Jericho had been in. "Looks like we're all that's left, pal." Piper sobbed, lurching forward and trying to get to her feet. "Don't cry, Piper," Beck said, pulling her face to her stomach, into her stomach to shield it from the elements. "Your tears will freeze and your face will get frostbite." It was true. She could already feel the skin underneath her eyes burning, but there was no stopping the crying then. Cursing, Beck removed her long coat and wrapped it completely around her head, and Piper felt her lift her shaking frame onto her shoulders again. "Hang tight, Pipe. We'll be underground in a minute," Beck told her, and then she jumped out of the window, landing hard in a pile of snow that built up around the door of the building. And then she took Piper back to the rebel base. Days later, she'd run out of tears, and she knew then that he'd been saying goodbye with his final hug. Somehow he must have known the great, invincible Jericho Johnson had finally reached the end of his journey. Piper was thankful at first that he had not let her come so that she could live on, but her thankfulness towards living grew weaker each day. Piper may still be breathing, but she truly died that day, and she knew nothing short of the gods sending Jericho back to her would ever make her feel truly alive again. This wasn't a comforting thought, because she'd abandoned all prayers to the Norse gods over a year ago. After deciding that if they hadn't helped her yet, they probably weren't about to start. Not a word escaped her lips for almost a month after Jericho's death, and she ended up in the rebel Mead Bay towards the end of it. Med Bay, like medical bay, not Mead Bay. Piper most likely would have died in there had it not been for Beck stopping by for a talk one day. "Hey, what's your deal, woman?" Beck asked her, leaning against the bed she was in, looking her up and down. "I see all your limbs are intact, so why are you still in bed?" "Leave." This was the first word she'd spoken in over a month. "I'm not going to let a perfectly capable warrior die in bed from a broken heart," Beck said. "Death will come to us all, Piper, but you have a lot more to do before you die." "Such as?" Piper asked coldly. "Jericho and my sister both died trying to save the world. I personally don't care about this world, so I didn't care about their mission, and honestly, I still don't. But since they were, in a roundabout way, mind you, killed by the Reds, I got enough of those guys on my hands to last us a lifetime. So if you want to exact a little revenge by killing a few of them..." Beck watched her once she'd finished talking, and Piper thought about her offer. After a few minutes, she sat up. "You people fight different than I. Weapons change. People change, goals change, but war," she shook her head slightly, "war never changes. I only had one mission with you, and that was enough to show me that you could take anything thrown, shot, or kicked at you, chew it up, and spit it back out." Piper swung her feet off the bed and glanced around the room so that she didn't have to look at her. "I don't want to fight anyone, sorry." Beck was silent for a minute, and then, "Piper, I hate to bring up everything you might find painful, but you're stuck here. And since I'm about to throw you out of my med bay because, I need it for people who have actually lost a limb or two, I'm going to lay out your options. You can either commit suicide, or you can actually use all those awesome battle smarts I know you have in your brain, stay alive, and who knows, maybe take out a few pesky Reds along the way." Piper told her to leave that day, and the day after that when she tried again to get her to join the war. She ended up staying in her quarters most of the time, remembering the kiss that she'd shared with Jericho in that very same room. Riding the struggle bus, I want to talk to my mom, find her. "All right, Becca. See you later, darling." Most days she ended up pacing the small room, trying not to think about Jericho's death and being stuck in the frozen Helheim of a place, and then everything changed. "Piper, is it?" she heard a man's voice say one day, and she gave a start, whirling around to see who was at her door. "Who are you?" she asked curtly to the black-haired man entering her quarters. Archimedes, he said. Everyone calls me Ark due to Archimedes being a mouthful, though, he added with a quick smile. He spoke like Jericho, his accent not at all thick like everyone else at the rebel base. What is it that you want, Archimedes? Please, ma'am, call me Ark, he said, extending a hand to her, which she shook quickly before dropping it, 'cause his hands were cold. I'm a traveler of sorts. I don't come this way often except to drop in on Beck from time to time and see how she's doing, since she knows that I spend most of my days combing what's left of America and looking for knowledge, remains of the past, and Beck told me that I'd get a charge out of meeting you. She told you everything? Piper asked, nodding. His smile widened. I've read that your people hunted polar bears. Were you any good at that? She looked at him, not really knowing what to say to that. He was maybe a few years older than Jericho had been, his face unshaven, his hair black, reaching his shoulders. He seemed kind enough. I killed everything I set out to. Laughing, he said, I'm sure you did. The only polar bears left up in there, the Yukon, left are up around the Yukon, which is where they were years ago. Oh, they're a lot bigger now, but has Beck at least taken you ice spider hunting yet? The way he looked at her with hopeful eyes hanging on her every answer to his many questions was strange, and Piper realized that Beck couldn't have told him everything. If she had, maybe this Ark would have left her alone. Listen, Archimedes. Ark, he corrected. Fine. Listen, Ark. I'm not really up to entertaining you with stories of my past hunts. It was a pleasure. She turned away then, hoping that he'd take the hint and leave. I've lost someone too, Ark said suddenly, his voice quiet as she froze. It never gets better, he said. You can be sorry as long as you want to try and think what you could have done differently, but I found the best way to cope is to do something that you're good at. Since I'm only good at digging around ruined cities, that's what I do and have been doing for the last 8 years. Piper kept her eyes on the wall, her arms crossed tight. And at work? You forgot about the person that you loved? Ark was silent for a few seconds before admitting, no, you'll never forget, but I promise you'll be able to do something with the rest of your life, should you choose. After mulling the idea over, she made a decision. I'll try it. Good, Ark said, and Piper could positively hear the smile on his face. Now, what are you good at, Piper? She turned, took one last look at her room, and then walked past him to the door. Killing things. That same day, Ark took her topside for the first ice spider hunt, which turned out to be quite a challenge, something she needed then. The weapons of the future were barbaric to her, and after a month of fumbling with rifles and pistols in spider hunts, rebel raids alongside with Beck, Ark decided that Piper needed weapons she was more comfortable with. You two are insane, Beck said, leaning against the concrete pillar while she watched Ark and Piper work their makeshift forge that they'd thrown together in one of the work areas below the base. A guy with a gun beats half a chick with a sword any day. Says the liar, Piper said, that being something that Jericho had said a lot and she adopted. Pulling the glowing sword out of the hot coals, she laid the blade on the iron desk and commenced pounding it out with a hammer. It's not going to be your average sword, Beck, Ark tried to explain to the frowning woman. The blade is made from the armors of a Raptor 6 that I scrapped. So she'll die in style? What a consolation. Thanks, Ark. I feel so much better now. Lay off, he said with a smile. Once we're done, it'll cut through any battle armor out there, so show some respect. Beck snorted at that. She still has to get close enough to people to use it, something that not a lot of assault rifle-toting people are keen on. Piper smiled to herself and kept pounding, stopping after a few swings to retie her blonde hair that had managed to work its way out of the braid she'd put it in and had struck her line of sight. I'm way ahead of you, Ark told her, crossing the large basement to the only other table in the spacious room that was covered with a black tarp. Beck followed him, and when she was standing beside him looking unimpressed, he pulled the tarp off, revealing the armor beneath it. Beck was suddenly impressed. Where'd you find this in such amazing conditions, he said, getting on her knees immediately for a close inspection of the snow-white battle armor. The ghost armor hasn't been in manufacturing for close to 100 years. Shrugging, Ark said, found it in D.C. last year. Don't let his modesty fool you. He's crazy about that thing, Piper said, sliding a red blade into the barrel of oil on the left with a resounding hiss and leading away from the tall flame. Understandable, Beck said. Have you ever told you what this thing can do? Piper shook her head while pulling the hot sword out of the oil and placing it on the iron table. Anyone got a good whetstone? Beck stopped ogling the white battle armor long enough to look at her like she just asked if she were a girl. Really? What? Oh, for the love of God. She stood up. I'll help. But I don't think this is my stamp. Don't take this as my stamp of approval, because sharpening your toothpick isn't. You do have a whetstone then? She asked. Oh, Piper, Beck said as she picked up the red broadsword and turned it over in her hands, the extremely hot steel not bothering her synthetic hands. You're so cute with your medieval talk, she said, heading straight for the stairs. You kids behave while Mama's gone. I totally understand, Kelly. It happens. Everybody's schedule is different, you know? When Piper pressed Ark about how she was going to sharpen her new sword, he explained that Beck would most likely use the laser etch system that sharpens the blades on the street mechs that they use to cut away ice. She'll have to raise the settings some, but I'm sure she'll do a good job. She doesn't want you to die, obviously, he joked. Winter had set in a few weeks after Ark had first shown up, and when he decided to wait out the 30-foot snowdrifts with the rebels for the upcoming months. But just because he was waiting didn't mean he wasn't busy. Most all platoons that went topside over the course of the winter were accompanied by Ark, who could wield a rifle as good as any man. Piper was also part of the platoon, and that's when Ark had come up with the idea of making her weapons. So what's so special about your suit? Piper asked, crossing to him and looking down at it. Well, it's yours now. It was made for lightweight pilots anyway, he said, pointing to a chest piece. Battle armor has generally always been bulky from the beginning, but it was also very good at keeping men alive due to its thickness. It was never really an issue for years because both sides happened to be fighting, also happened to be using thick, heavy battle armor. It wasn't until the Ghost was created that things started changing in the industry. Piper laid a hand on the shock white armor. Change how? She asked, inspecting it. Ghosts were engineered to be light and just as strong as any armor out there. It took a while, but the men working on it finally succeeded and made the model that you're touching now. They're capable of withstanding whatever the big armor can, but they're a lot faster too. And check this out, he said, lifting the right arm of the armor, hitting a few buttons on the small screen that occupied the wrist, and then the white armor vanished. These were used in recon more than anything. I've seen a she attempted. Dragunov, Ark said, nodding. Beck's father was without a doubt one of the greatest minds of the past century. His cloak design lasted longer than this older suit, but you can still get good 2 minutes or so out of it, maybe enough time to hide if you need to, or plan a good attack. Or that, he said, laughing. Want to give it a try? What, right now? Still laughing, he shoved her softly. No, yesterday, of course right now. Let's do this, Piper said, stealing yet another thing that she'd heard Jericho say countless times. Jericho. There he was again. It seemed no matter what she did or said, he was always there. But that's what she wanted, or else she might forget him altogether. This is what she wanted. Was it not? Piper was shaken from the thoughts of a dead love by the very much alive man who'd thrown himself into her life. You okay? He must have seen her face. I am, thanks. Piper, he said, shocking her when he took her hand in his. I'm not trying to butt into your life in the least. I confess that if you weren't here, I would have left months ago. But I'm drawn to you because I know how you feel, and I wish someone had been there for me when I was going through this. His hands weren't cold this time. Forging weapons has that effect. I understand, was all she said, and he let go of her hands and turned back to the Ghost. This isn't as user-friendly as the other armor when you're putting it on yourself and everything. Here. He punched more buttons on the chest, arms, and legs, and the helmet opened with a small hiss on what looked like hinges. It's a little snugger than the big ones, but it'll feel like real armor, which is what I'm hoping for you. Piper laid in the open suit, wriggling around a little and making a face. It smells odd. You get used to that, Ark said while starting on her legs. It works sort of like an auto tumble fashion, and the legs and arms will close themselves if you push them in the right direction. She felt the suit legs and the feet close around her human ones. How's that feel? Fine, Piper said, holding up a leg and moving her armored foot around a little. In less than a minute, Piper was swinging her steel-clad feet to the concrete floor and standing. She was so shocked when she saw that Ark was still taller than she was. She mentioned it, and he laughed and said, yeah, you only get a couple of inches out of this thing. Sorry, but some of the most dangerous enemies are the ones that we underestimate. Are you ready for the helmet? Piper took a deep breath and nodded before the mask lowered over her face. Since she came from what Beck had dubbed a medieval time, she wasn't ready to see Ark standing right in front of her with no distorted vision on her part. Reaching up, she saw her gauntleted hands when she felt the mask piece. It was a smooth white surface without any mouth, eye holes, or discernible face-like features. Ark smiled at her. Do you want me to explain how you can see and breathe? Maybe later, Piper said, walking around and looking at her hands and feet while she did so. After pacing around for a few moments, rolling her shoulders and neck and flexing her hands, she asked, Now what? You've seen the other suits before, Ark said, leaning against the now empty table. How about touching the ceilings for starters? That's when Ark began her battlesuit training. In a little over an hour, Piper was confident with her new armor. In a little over a month, she was flawlessly executing missions as well as enemies. The only problem, or kink as Ark called it, was that they ran into was the first sword they made broke after a few missions. After going back to the drawing board, Ark was finally able to construct an unbreakable blade for her, except that the final product turned out to be over 6 feet long and weighed close to 300 pounds. There's no way that I can lift that thing, Piper said, shaking her head and crossing her arms as she looked down at the large weapon that Ark had just unveiled. It'll be a cinch to use in the suit, he assured her. It's at least 6 inches wide at the base of the blade. I know it's big, Pipe, but after all the folds I had to do with the Raptor 6 alloy, it's the best I could do. The sharpening job is of my own invention, and in theory, it should never get dull. How? Don't ask, he said with a small laugh. Suffice to say that it should actually sharpen itself the more it's used, as long as you're cutting through the same or different versions of the alloy. Theoretically, anyway. You mean other suits, she said. Exactly. It looked wonderful, even though the enormous broadsword looked befittingly giant. The blade was a dark red and had been honed incredibly. Where will it be if I'm not using it on a mission? She asked, sliding her hand along the wide blade. Ark pointed to her white armor that was being held up by 2 iron hooks in the middle of the basement workshop so that he could tinker with it. I'll show you. Piper crossed the room with him, and he pointed to the new gadget that he'd attached to the back. This is the granddaddy of all magnets, he said. I fashioned it so that the blade of the broadsword would stick to it when not in use. Demagnetizing it is as simple as touching this button. And you've tried it? Smiling, he said, well, not yet. I need an extra hand to move the sword over here. With a great deal of effort, the two of them somehow managed to drag the red broadsword to the suit and get it close enough to the magnet. Piper was shocked when they released it, and the red blade instantly stuck to the stack by 8 by 6 inch piece on the back of the suit. The edges of the magnet were raised a good inch to keep the blade in place at a diagonal slant, allowing her to get at the handle easily with her right hand and help her not to drag the blade due to its length. They had a few seconds to exchange triumphant smiles before one of the chains holding the battle armor broke and the suit and sword ended up in a tangled mess on the floor. After a few weeks of testing and retesting, Ark said that her armor and weapon were finally ready for combat. Merry Christmas, Piper, he said, smiling at her. And that was 2 years ago. Piper had changed since the day she lost Jericho, and although she'd never be the same, that much was certain. Nowadays, her new life started to make more sense, and Piper had begun to wonder if she had purpose in this hellish future after all. Jericho once told her that by every natural law they shouldn't have even met each other, let alone fallen in love, because they were from 2 different times. But after close to 3 years now, she looked back at all she'd accomplished while she was standing stranded here, and now the Viking woman was beginning to think that this was truly where she belonged. Piper didn't know what was in store for her on this frozen planet, but she did know that she had one day come to love the people that called themselves the rebels, and as long as there was breath in her lungs and a beating heart in her chest, she would use up the last of both to protect and defend them. Piper paused her recording, mulling over everything that she just talked about for the last few minutes before knowing how to end it. I could keep going and mention how I am now second in command of the rebels, and about how I've somehow been able to forget my past long enough to love again. But that's something that I never thought would be possible, she smiled suddenly. But I think I've explained myself enough for now. Beck will just have to take what she gets, where this request log is concerned. I have a date anyway. This is Commander Piper of Ghost Squadron wishing you a very Merry Christmas. Piper pushed back from the desk and stood, logging out of the private HoloNet while she did. She felt like she'd been sitting for a long time, her legs stiffened, although it was most likely from the cold. There really wasn't a place left anyway that didn't have at least a cold draft, and the rebel base was no exception. Nice touch with the Christmas bit, she heard from the door behind her. How long have you been there? Piper asked accusingly, glancing at Ark against the door frame. Morning, Valerie. Long enough, Ark said, crossing to her. Has anyone ever told you how beautiful your smile is? Jericho did 3 years ago, Piper almost told him. Not recently, she said, wrapping her arms around his neck and smirking at him. Maybe you should. Your smile is beautiful, Ark said, smiling himself and kissing her forehead. Let's see if it's just as beautiful while we eat, Piper told him, pulling away and grabbing a white long coat from the desk chair that she'd been sitting at. I'm starving. Ark's smile faltered. Actually, I came to inform you that Beck wants to see you. Groaning, Piper let her head roll back and she sighed at the ceiling. I finished her journal assignment. Beck can wait until after we've had a normal evening together. It's been weeks. I know, Pipe, he said, his face saying more than his words, but I think that you should go see her. Piper frowned at him while she slipped into the white long coat that she and everyone in the battalion command wore. Is she worse? I'm not sure. Her normal evening suddenly forgotten, and Piper headed for the door, stopping for only a quick kiss before she left. I'll see you later, love, Ark told her. The Rebel base used to be a mech factory over 50 years ago, and it was just within the city limits of Flagstaff. Most of the bay was used for mech creation, and they were now being used for almost the same purpose. Piper walked across the long iron gangplank hanging from the ceiling and glanced down at the Rebel men working on the never-ending flow of broken-down machinery and weapons. Shivering, Piper pulled her white hood over her blonde hair, reaching the end of the gangplank, and she took the elevator to the floor that Beck's quarters were on. Most leaders have better living areas than the men and women they're leading. Even the Viking kings did, but Beck's quarters were small and barely bigger than Piper's. When Piper had asked Beck about it years ago, Beck told her that she didn't care that a bed was a bed, but Piper knew now that the reason Beck didn't care was because she wasn't actually human. Piper had known this from the start, but she was never more certain of that fact until the past few months. Beck had always been eccentric and downright hateful in her mannerisms, all of which were excused by everyone since she was physically able to rip a man's head from his shoulders if she wanted to. But now things were different. It had started with several headaches almost 2 years ago, landing the Rebel leader in bed with most sitting out missions with others. A year ago, Beck began blacking out. On good occasions, she would simply faint. On bad ones, she would do and say things for days, only to come back herself having no recollection of what she'd done. In the past few months, Beck's health had declined drastically, and she had confined herself to her quarters, allowing no one in except for Piper and Ark. Beck didn't have to eat or drink or do anything normal to stay alive, so the Rebel physicians were at a loss of what exactly to do. The only thing that Beck had to do that was human was sleep. Other than that, she was self-sustaining, or at least she had been, up until 2 months ago. That's when her long black hair had begun to fall out in large clumps, resulting in Beck deciding to shave off the rest herself. Now, it's my idea, she told Piper when she first saw it. Those weren't comforting thoughts as Piper exited the elevator and knocked on Beck's door. It's open, Beck said from inside. Piper pushed into the medium-sized room and found Beck sitting on her bed, her hands gripping the sheets so hard that her arms shook. What is happening? Piper asked her, quickly crossing the room and dropping to her knees in front of a quivering woman, placing her hands on Beck's forearms. I'm dying, Beck said, her voice barely a whisper. No, you're not, Piper assured her with a smile. You probably just passed out again. Beck was already shaking her head, her eyes squeezed shut. This was different. I saw my body on the bed and I was standing beside it. I tried to touch my arm, but my hand went right through it. And then Piper saw something she'd never seen before. A tear rolled down Beck's cheek when she opened her eyes. I was dead. I know it. But you're alive now, and you're talking to me. I don't understand it either, but either way, I don't have much time left, Beck told her, suddenly grasping Piper's shoulder and looking her in the eye. Listen to me. Almost 4 months ago, I was able to contact someone in Cross's facility, some science loser named Ritu. She said that Cross was working on someone like me, only someone that was perfect and didn't have an expiration date. She was talking fast, but Piper took all of it in. Dr. Cross had rebuilt Beck over 7 years ago, and she'd basically been killed during a firefight in the streets when she was 18, but Beck had become obsessed with somehow getting him to fix her. Attempts over the past few months had failed due to his building being a near fortress. Beck, you don't have an expiration date, Piper said while she gripped Beck's arms. Says the girl in the room who still has hair, Beck muttered. Anyway, Ritu said that she'd contact me once Cross was done with his little science project and she'd know how to fix me by then. Piper wanted to believe her. The idea of her friend, the person responsible for saving her life, somehow thriving again with her hair and strength and attitude back was what she really wanted to believe. But she also knew that Beck hadn't been mentally stable as of late, and she had been prone to episodes of bordering schizophrenia. Piper must not have been good at hiding her thoughts because Beck shook her head. I'm not crazy, Piper. Get me on the HoloNet and I'll prove it to you. Before Piper could say anything else, her holotab lit up. Commander Piper? A female voice chirped. Beck was still looking at her when she answered the call. Go ahead, Roan. S-20s, ma'am. 3 of them just came across our borders. Look like bears, Roan said. They're coming in fast, too. Piper stood. Assemble the ghosts, Roan. Aye, Commander. Beck was staring hard at the floor when Piper closed her holotab. I'm not crazy, she said quietly. I don't know why my contact hasn't called me back yet, but I know I talked to her. Piper squeezed her friend's hand. I'll be back in a few hours and we'll talk it over chess, okay? Deal? She was trying to lighten the mood, but Beck was more distant than usual. Try not to die, she said, lying down on her bed and pulling the covers over herself, and then we'll try to contact Ritu. Piper headed for the door. Dying was the furthest thing from her mind. Before long, she was suited and ready to go. Piper rolled her neck after the smooth face piece of the helmet clamped down. In a few seconds, her visual display and HUD activated. She could see perfectly while she glanced at the rest of her troops as they armored up. The christening of the Ghost Squadron had taken place almost 2 years ago after Beck had insisted on Piper taking on more responsibilities, besides following her around like a lost snowcat and bugging her for missions. Originally, the Ghost Squadron was just a normal 5-person team with Piper at the helm as the commander, but after 2 years, the fame set by some of the most successful missions ever to be carried on had marshaled out the white armored team to one of the highest ranks in the rebel militia. Sometimes Piper found it hard to believe that she now commanded the rebels who had taught her not that long ago. There was even a special training program set in place and taught by ARC just for men and women trying to get into the elite task force. Since Piper had been the one controlling the outfit, her Viking ways had carried over into the future with her. The only reason, she felt, that a soldier needed to be replaced was if that soldier died. And since Ghost Squadron was, as aforementioned, an elite force task, that didn't happen very often. One, in fact, was the number of troops that Piper had lost under her command, and that had been recently. How do you like the suit, newbie? Gustav, the squad sniper, asked the replacement. It's fine, Kavi, the new girl said while she flexed her hand around. Kavi was around 18, as Ark had told Piper, one of the best the Ghost program had to offer to replace Wells, the scout that had been killed by the bears on their last mission. Kavi's hair was cut short, reaching just below her chin, and was a light purple. Didn't get to pick my hair color, Commander, Kavi said during her interview. When Piper asked her about it, my parents must have figured I was going to design clothes for a living. Piper laughed at that before welcoming the girl aboard the Ghost Squadron and issuing her a hooded white long coat, directing her to the Ghost barracks. Most of the people she'd met in the last few years were sporting some strange hair color, and they all told her the same thing, that they hadn't had a choice in the matter. You'd think whoever came up with the crazy idea could at least give you a way to change out of it later in life, Piper told Ark once Kavi had left with her duffel over her shoulder, heading for the small set of barracks assigned for ghosts only. It is possible, Ark admitted with a shrug, but more severely inconvenient or bothersome process you'll never find. Most people just leave it because of that, but also because since Flagstaff has never been at the forefront of fashion, finding a doctor with the knowledge to do it is nay impossible. Kavi tapped away at the screen on her left wrist, and her helmet began closing, covering her bright hair. There. Now, Gustav told her, now you're not a target for practice. Leave off, Gustav, Baron, the largest man of the Ghosts, told the sniper as he checked his assault rifle. No one really knew how old Baron was, but he looked to be somewhere between 35 and 40, with tan skin and a shiny bald head. Three of the five under Piper's command had been men until Kavi replaced Wells. Now Baron and Gustav were outnumbered, something the other female ghosts weren't allowing them to forget. About time we evened the testosterone in this squad, Helena muttered to Roan as she clasped her white hooded cloak over her armor. Helena was the oldest of the ghosts, but just as capable. Roan had been the youngest until Kavi, and Piper was willing to bet that the black-haired girl was ready to pass the torch to someone younger, since being the youngest in the group always led to witticisms at every turn. "Fall in," Piper said, and all the murmurs and jests stopped as the men and women in white armor lined up. "For those of you who haven't met her, this is Kavi, our new scout." Then she pointed to each of her troops and rattled off their parts of the ghost squadron for Kavi. "Gustav is our ranger, Baron is our muscle, Helena is acting medical officer, Roan is explosives, and you are our new scout." "And Commander Piper is all those rolled into one," Helena said with a smile. "Helheim, yes," Piper said, returning the smile. "Now, who wants to go bear hunting?" This is what she always asked the ghosts, and it was a simple question that had escalated into an inside joke that was always met with chuckles. She asked them this no matter which army they were hunting, since the term was used by her people on Svalbard, and it was meant to ask if someone wanted to go do something fun and maybe dangerous. Then they would all laugh and head for the elevator. Kavi didn't share in the laughter, and she frowned the whole way to the elevator that was about to take them topside. "A warrior should always be able to laugh in the face of death, Kavi," Piper said after she hit the top-level button and the doors closed. "If you survive the day, then you'll know next time." "We'll break into two-man teams," Piper said to her troops. "Each team will get an S-20, and Gustav and Roan, Baron and Helena, and you're with me, Kavi." Most accesses to the frozen surface were designed to be in a form of shelter, so that whoever felt big enough to venture forth from the rebel base could have a few minutes to get their bearings before wading into the snow. Piper stepped out of the elevator when the doors finally opened into what used to be the basement of a glorious hotel. Rusted water heaters lined the walls of a large room, and wheeled baskets were cluttering up half the room. 5 green blips appeared on the nav map at the bottom of the right of her HUD, indicating her squad. Since she didn't see 3 red blips anywhere, the S-20s were most likely cloaked. Bigger mechs couldn't completely vanish from sight, but they could fool a targeting system. "Fan out!" Gustav headed up the stairs on the left side of the basement with Roan on his heels. "Here's an idea," Gustav crackled his voice over the squadron's private channel. "How about we don't level skyscrapers this time?" "Shut up," Roan said. "That wasn't my fault, and you know it." Piper took the opposite set of stairs with the rest of the ghosts behind her. In a few short minutes, they had made it to what was left of the hotel lobby. Fierce gusts of wind blowing through shattered windows and kicking up snow all around them. Then everyone pulled their assault rifles and checked their rounds, except Piper. "Kavi with me," she said, demagnetizing the enormous broadsword from her back. Kavi couldn't help but stare, watching her commander stab the point of the red blade deep into the concrete floor with ease so that she could pull on her hooded white cloak. Ghost Squadron had some of the best tech that the rebels had to offer, and the cloaks had to be one of Piper's favorite. Thick, wool-like material did nothing but blend the ghosts all the better into the whiteness of the ever-present snow, but they also kept the squad off of enemy nav maps. Devices to throw off targeting and locating had been around for centuries. Beck told her when she presented her with the first white cloak, but really for mechs and airstrikes, these are the first portable ones. Piper pulled the broadsword out of the floor and headed for the street. With Kavi close behind her, the armored feet tromping softly on the once no doubt beautiful floor. The wind was worse out in the open while Piper and Kavi went a few blocks, and then Piper held up a hand to stop, crouching on the sidewalk close to the side of the building beside her. Heavy footsteps were just around the corner. "Found mine first," Piper said in a sing-songy voice, something that she'd heard someone do a long time ago. Jericho. It was Jericho that had said some things that way. She didn't want to forget it. She couldn't forget it. Not yet, anyway. Piper shook her head to clear her mind before her attack. "We have visual," Helena said in a buzz. "Ah, come on," Roan groaned. "Why am I always paired with the loser sniper?" Got ours," Gustav said dejectedly. "Attack on mark," Piper ordered, tightening her grip on the hilt of her giant sword. "How do you want to do this?" Kavi asked, shifting the assault rifle uneasily in her armored hands. "Ever go up against an S-20? "No, Commander," the girl admitted. "Stay back, then," Piper told her. "Watch and learn." "Commander!" "That's an order, Kavi." And then the S-20 rounded the corner, not 30 feet away. "Ghosts, attack!" Piper ordered, already sprinting towards her target, her broadsword whistling through the snowy air and connecting with the mammoth left leg of the mech. The red blade sliced through the armor at the ankle like butter as the white warrior kept up her momentum, spinning once again more powerful before her severing off the other leg. This all happened in almost 2 fractured seconds before the mech had time to respectfully fall onto its left side. Piper was in the air, tucked into a ball, spinning before landing on the dome of the S-20. Since it was mid-fall, she landed on the leveling right side of the dome. The unfortunate pilot never saw who drove the large red blade straight through the 8-inch dome and into the side of his throat. Piper rode the S-20 to the ground, pulling her broadsword out quickly before flipping off the mech just as it hit the street, kicking up snow. Kavi watched the 6-second attack with her mouth hanging open. She closed it quickly when her commander materialized from the blustering snow, her red sword in her right hand, the tip almost touching the ground as she walked toward her, the white cloak billowing from her left under the wind. "They're pretty easy once you get the hang of it," Piper said. "Next time I'll let you have a go at it." "That was quick," Kavi said, standing. "Think so?" "Target neutralized," they heard Baron's voice say. "A well-placed sticky grenade," Helena said. "You, Commander?" "Red Falcon," Piper informed her before chuckling and asking, "What do you think I was going to use? One of the barbaric rifles you people use?" "Another one bites the flakes," Rowan buzzed in. But then, suddenly, another red blip appeared on their nav map. "You sure about that?" Kavi asked. "Wait for it," Rowan said, and then there was an earth-shaking explosion, causing Piper and Kavi to touch the building beside them for support. And then the blip vanished. "Told you," Rowan muttered. "Good job, Ghost Squadron," Piper said, heading back down the sidewalk with a befuddled Kavi behind her. "Let's pack up. I have a date to finish anyway." There was a tradition among most ghosts to follow every successful mission. The celebration included, but was not limited to, a feast filled with laughter, battle scar stories, and arm wrestling. The main course was mostly ice spider legs that had been skinned and slowly roasted over a spit in the ghost barracks, while the only thing to drink besides snow melt or smelt was commonly known was a concoction Baron had discovered years ago, officially called ice spider wine. "You won't find this stuff in any militia kitchen, love," Gustav assured Kavi while peering curiously into the cup he'd given her. Tell her how you make it, Baron." Baron groaned as if he'd already explained it 1,000 times, because he had, and he said, "You know what's in it." "Come on, big guy," Rowan chimed in, propping her boots up on the table with the small mess hall. "We want to hear it from the master." Sighing, Baron gave up and explained the delicate process to Kavi. Her eyes widened with each word. The first ingredient was the residual oil left over at the bottom of a pot after boiling spider skins. And then the oil was added to about a gallon of smelt and placed in a cellar to ferment. But, like one would think, ice spider wine didn't exactly get its name from the oil part of the recipe as much as the few drops of spider venom that were added to the gallon container before letting it ferment. "There's poison in this?" Kavi blurted out after Baron had finished his meager seminar on the culinary arts. The big man merely shrugged at her. "Don't drink more than a cup a day," Piper said, heading for the door. "Their venom isn't exactly toxic, but it will give you hallucinations from Helheim if you're not careful." And then she left the bewildered girl with her fellow troops. Piper pulled on her white hood before sliding her hands into her pockets, her boots making a soft clanging noise on the cast iron catwalk as she headed for her quarters. All mechs and tech operations had ceased for the night, and Piper took in the silence, glancing down at the empty bays as she walked slowly, relinquishing quiet. Then her holotab lit up on her wrist, and Ark's face appeared above it. "How was the bear hunt?" Smiling, Piper touched his face and entered the holochat. "Not too bad. Kavi did all right for her first time." "You mean she didn't die?" "Yeah, that." Ark laughed before asking, "What's your plan for the rest of the evening?" "Well, I was hoping to share a quiet supper with this handsome geologist, except I don't know where he is." "That sounds amazing, dear," he said, and Piper frowned. "But I have to pack. The drifts are lowering, and I need to hit the trail for Anchorage in the morning while there's still time." Piper had known Ark was leaving soon, but she didn't know exactly when. This had happened more than once in the almost 3 years and Piper had thought that it would eventually get easier to be abruptly separated from someone she cared about without warning. At least with Ark, the separation was only by miles and not death. "Will you come to see me before you leave?" Piper asked. "No," Ark said with a smile. "Shut up," she said, laughing, signing out of the hollow chat.
It wasn't strange for the clansmen to leave their wives and children for months during the summer for hunting and fishing, but as harsh as Svalbard had been, the worst days weren't even close to the good ones here. When she made her way back to her quarters, she removed her long coat, dropping it over the back of a chair before changing out of her black jumpsuit into her normal sleepwear, a lime green American Eagle t-shirt and faded jeans. She tried to throw these clothes away several times and eventually made it far enough to get the outfit given to her by Jericho years ago into the disposal bin, only to immediately dig the clothes back out. She even had the blue shoes that he called Chucks, except the black and white laces had been removed and wrapped around the hilt of the Red Falcon 2 years ago for better gripping. Climbing into bed, Piper pulled the thick covers up over her chin and peered at the ceiling. The worst part about Ark leaving was that he made her forget. The only time she was able to not think was when she was fighting or with Ark. Even if they were too busy to talk some days, it was still fine because he was around. My gosh, this chapter is so long. Holy crap. What the heck, John? 7:52 already. What in the world? But after he was gone, there wasn't anyone to fight. Piper would end up lying in bed like she was now, staring up at the ceiling. She didn't want to forget, telling herself this constantly, but she also didn't want to have the past in her mind at all times. Then why keep the mementos and sleep in them every night? Those were the first thoughts that crept in, and those alone were enough to make her question everything. She would fall asleep eventually most nights, but even sleep sometimes brought on dreams overflowing with ghosts that were gone by day. Most of Jericho and even Bjorn the Berserker, her chieftain, found their way into her dreams. "Take care of her, Beck," Jericho would say, turning on his heels. "Don't leave!" Piper would scream, except her love couldn't hear her over the sound of hundreds of blacksmiths beating on hundreds of red swords. This night was no different, and Ark hadn't even left yet. She dozed for what felt like 5 minutes before she felt someone sit on the bed. "Stay warm out there, Ark," Piper said quietly, her voice sounding like she needed more sleep. "Ark's been gone for over an hour," Beck said, startling her. Sitting up quickly, Piper asked, "He didn't stop by?" Piper squinted at the bright blue light when she switched on her holotab to see what time it was. 6:45 p.m., the day after Christmas. "How are you feeling?" Piper asked the synthetic woman while swinging her feet onto the cold floor. "Sorry for waking you," Beck said, ignoring the question about her health. "Standing," she added, "but there's something you need to see." Piper knew Beck well enough to know that if it could have waited a few hours, she wouldn't have come to get her. In less than a minute, Piper had gotten into her boots and pulled her white long coat over her green shirt, following Beck out of her quarters. It was a silent journey with nothing but footsteps echoing for ambience and the quiet hum of the elevator as they ascended to Beck's quarters. Piper frowned when Beck passed the door to her room and went to the war room instead, not 10 feet down the hall. Since the council consisted of Beck, Piper, and Ark, the room wasn't large. "Sit down," Beck ordered, motioning to the steel table that was used for tactical planning. "Ritu contacted me today," she said, pulling up her holotab. "She said Cross would be leaving for Anchorage this week, sometime because his new test subject did extremely well on his or her first trial." Frowning, Piper said, "Ark just left for Anchorage." "They won't cross paths. Considering your precious geologist doesn't have air clearance, they'll be traveling on foot if that old snowmobile of his breaks down," Beck told her. "But I didn't wake you to talk about Cross." Now Piper was really confused. "What then?" "Not 30 minutes after Ritu told me about Cross leaving, she contacted me again, looking battered, and said that the test subject had escaped. I sent out one of the drones to see if I could get a look at Cross's new toy." Beck hit a few keys on Piper's holotab. "Take a look for yourself." Piper opened what she'd sent her, and the drone footage started. At first, all she could see was snow, until a lone figure dressed in black with a hooded appearance moved quickly along the side of the building. When the figure entered an old apartment building, the drone camera stopped suddenly. "Here's an hour later," Beck said as she pulled the hologram slider along the back and skipped forward. And then Piper saw a 5-man team enter the apartment building, rogues, most likely due to the mismatched battle armor that they all wore. The drone then flew around the other side of the complex when it heard the commotion coming from that side. Piper wasn't shocked at first, until she saw the hooded figure climbing the side of the building, until she noticed that whatever was climbing at the alarming rate was wearing a suit of
a kind that she hadn't seen. How... Oh, but it gets better, Beck said just as the man in black dropped from the top of the complex onto a free fall with his arms outstretched, snagging a rogue who had just leaned out the window for a better shot on the way down, pulling the armored man deep into the snow. Piper frowned again. When a bright blue flash exploded from the snow and ice, instantly melting a large radius. Was that an EMP grenade? I thought it was, Beck muttered while the drone hovered close to the building and peered through a shattered window, but keep watching. Piper saw the hooded man fall into a window soaked from the water that he had just made. His foot seemed to get stuck in the refreezing liquid. In a few seconds, once he'd freed himself, one of the rogues tore through the ceiling and kicked him across the gallery almost 20 feet. Piper was stunned when the man in black got to his feet and leapt the large gap between him and the armored assailant, taking the man to the floor by grabbing his helmet and... What was that? Piper asked suddenly, sitting forward in her chair when she saw the same bright blue flashes. That wasn't a grenade. That came from his hands. I know. I watched this already, remember? The remaining rogues barreled down the stairs, and then the hooded man shouted something at them, holding up both of his hands. Blue and white licks of electricity crackled in his hands, and the streaks were crawling up his arms to his shoulders. Piper couldn't hear the exchange, but it ended with the man lowering his hands and one of the rogues approaching him. The drones lowered onto the floor of the apartment building, zooming in on the hooded man talking to the armored rogue. And then the video paused. Piper glanced at Beck after she stopped the video and saw what she was watching. What? I just want to let you know that this next part shocked me a good bit, so just, I don't know, steel yourself? And then she played the video. Piper saw the rogue's helmet open and recognized the female pilot instantly. What's Red doing chasing after science projects? She asked. That's not the wild part, Pipe. And then the man in black removed his hood and shook hands with the red-haired woman. Piper's heart stopped. Are you okay? Beck asked. Piper couldn't speak. Look, I don't know what's going on, but we just need to think about this and make a plan of action. Piper wasn't listening while she stared at the man glancing around the burned-out gallery of the complex. It was Jericho. Beck and Piper sat silently at the table of the war room for a long time after watching the video from the surveillance drone, and then Beck broke the silence. We know he's with the rogues. And we don't know where the rogues are, Piper countered, standing. I'm going back to bed. Piper, wait, Beck tried. Don't do anything stupid, were the last words that Piper heard before she exited the room and climbed into the elevator. Once she was back in her room, she locked the door, removed her long coat, and began slowly pacing the small room, questions bubbling to the surface. Jericho Johnson was alive? But it couldn't be true, could it? Where had he been the last 3 years if it was really him? Why hadn't he tried to find her? Jericho Johnson was alive. Why was he so fast and able to climb up vertical surfaces without a suit? Why was he wielding lightning like the god of thunder? And why did he go with the rogues? Jericho was alive. She sat on the bed and drummed her fingers on the blanket before standing and resuming her pacing, her hand covering her mouth. How could this have happened? She saw him die, had she not? She'd survived for 3 years without him, had she not? Why was he suddenly alive and back? Piper had spent years simultaneously trying and not trying to forget him because she knew he was gone and never coming back. He was dead to her, and she had given what was left of her heart to someone else because she just knew he was gone. But he wasn't gone. Piper didn't know what the future held as she lay in her bed. Somehow, though, she found sleep easy that night. As no memory seemed to plague her, she knew, as her eyes slipped shut the last time before falling asleep, that her nights of tossing and turning were over. She didn't know what the future held, but she did know one thing. Jericho Johnson was alive. Dun, dun, dun. That was a really long chapter. That was like the longest freaking chapter in the history of this book, or of this series in general. Freaking wild. Freaking wild. Wow, wow, wow. Wow, wow, wow. All right, I gotta go because I got a lot of work to do today. Morning, Tressa, hello. But I will go announce the winner of the giveaway first. Got here before the last line. Wah, wah, wah. Well, you already knew he was alive from the previous chapter, so that wasn't a surprise. It's only a surprise to Piper. But I will see you all later. Bye, guys.